There's this awesome story from the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. It's the second book of the Bible. And if you remember, the story of Exodus is God's people, the Israelites, have been in slavery under the Egyptian powers for literally centuries, for hundreds of years, 400 plus years. And God finally goes to call them out and withdraw them. And he chooses a man named Moses. And Moses goes in and meets with Pharaoh. And if you remember the story, he performs all these miracles, all these different signs. And eventually Pharaoh lets the people go. And they head out into the wilderness. They follow Moses out into the wilderness. And there's this awesome story. It's right after they've been let go and they're out in the desert, and from Exodus 14. And it said, the Lord essentially comes to Moses and he says, all right, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near these Pi Hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea, directly opposite from Baal Zephon. And Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around in the land in confusion. They're wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. It's this wonderful encounter where the Israelites go and they are then wandering around, and it works. The Egyptians take the bait and they actually come to get the Israelites, who are now encamped by the sea. And the next thing that happens is so cool, because they lure them out. They lure them out by the sea. All right, you ready? And then the Israelites start complaining. They're like, they're going to kill us, essentially. They're going to destroy all of us. And they said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we just say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. And Moses answered the people, don't be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. And it's this awesome passage, and we quote it all the time. The Lord will fight for you. Just be still. He's going to fight for you. And they're in the wandering. They're in this place that God's called them to, out in the middle of the desert, wandering around. And then God cuts off Moses right as he's saying that. And he said, then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Why are you yelling out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Keep going. Keep wandering around. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. And you remember the story. The Israelites cross the sea. A mighty east wind comes up and it blows up and sets the walls of the sea aside, and they walk out. The Egyptian armies follow them and they get stuck in the mud, and then the waters rescind and come and cover them up. And the cool thing is, at the end of that whole story, at the end of Exodus 14, the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. And that day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And the Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and they put their trust in Him. That's quite a passage. See, I think we talked about last week that wandering stems from the brokenness of this world, from the lies and the sin that we've made. And in our wandering, we think God forgets about us. But actually, in our wandering is where the trust in God really takes place. There's this great passage, this great story you might remember from Tolkien's writings, Lord of the Rings. And he's talking about Strider, who will become the king, but he's a ranger. He's this wandering guy. And there's this song that they call, it's all that is gold does not glitter. And here's how it goes. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. Not all those who wander are lost. Man, that's truth, isn't it? We think when we're wandering around, maybe we're in a spot like LaBarque Creek trailhead here, just south of St. Louis. Isn't this beautiful? This little creek as it runs through, and maybe you saw the trail to begin with. But as we're wandering out, we think we're lost from God, that God's maybe forgotten about us or isn't doing anything with us anymore. But the truth is, in our wandering is where faith is truly developed, where we learn to really trust in who God is. It reminds me of Hebrews 11. You remember that famous passage? The author of Hebrews lists off all of these people because of their faith. He lists off Abraham and Isaac, and he lists off all these. But at the end of it is this really cool passage. And what more shall I say? I don't have the time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. It sounds like that Exodus narrative doesn't. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and an imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins, goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes and in the ground. See, here's the truth. I think the more we trust, have faith in God, the more we find ourselves as wanderers in the world. And yet, the opposite is also the truth. The more we find ourselves comfortable and at home in this world, the more we find that we have wandered from our relationship with God. In the wandering, God forms us, forges us, and He builds the faith that will conquer all the adversity that we might face in this world. And we learn to trust the one who never forgets us and never abandons us.